Greetings! Welcome to This, That, and the Other, where I react to, respond to, comment on, question, or otherwise propound on whatever I find of interest on any given day. Now, today's topic Denethor has just sent Faramir and his company to their doom, with a nonsensical demand to retake Osgiliath, which is now the base of thousands of orcs preparing for the assault on Minas Tirith in 3 days' time. But there was not one massive cavalry charge, with the entire company being wiped out. And no heart-wrenching song from Pippin.
The edge of night, oh, shall...
More on them later, but for now, following the chronology set out in Appendix B, the Tale of Years, we can finally close out the Two Towers. As usual, the book and the movie differ greatly. And as always, the book is the truth. So it looks like story time again. If you remember, in the movie, it was erroneously reported that Gollum framed Sam for the loss of the Lembas, followed by the equally erroneous report that Frodo sent Sam home, and that Sam then found the missing Lembas and set his resolve to save Frodo and destroy Gollum. You can believe this if you want, but you shouldn't. The trio, all three of them, reached the entrance to the tunnel. Gollum led them in, then disappeared, leaving the hobbits to negotiate the labyrinthine cavern on their own.
Smeagol? Smeagol!
Shortly, they became aware of a feeling of being looked at. Then a sound came from behind. The sound grew nearer, accompanied by a stench. Sam suddenly remembered the vial of starlight Galadriel had given to Frodo. Realization came to Frodo slowly as he remembered. He reached for the vial and held it aloft. It glimmered, then began to shine brightly. He seldom remembered it on the road and hadn't thought of using it. He cried out in Elvish, not knowing what he had said, feeling as if someone else was speaking through him. As Frodo spoke, he felt a great evil force regarding him. A short distance down the tunnel, he was aware of eyes growing visible. The hidden menace was becoming visible. Monstrous eyes filled with horrible delight, gloating over their prey, trapped beyond all hope of escape. Frodo and Sam began to slowly back away, their own gaze held by the dreadful stare of those eyes. As they backed, the eyes advanced. They turned and fled together. But even as they ran, Frodo looked back and saw that the eyes came leaping up from behind. The stench of death was like a cloud about him. Gathering his courage, he lifted up the vial once more. The eyes halted. Then, without really thinking, Frodo drew his sword, Sting flashed out, sparkling in the silver light. Then with the vial of Galadriel in one hand and Sting in the other, Frodo walked steadily down to meet the eyes. They wavered. One by one they dimmed, and slowly they drew back. One by one they all went dark and were gone. Sam was close behind the whole time, his own sword drawn and ready. They turned back, first walking and then running. A flow of air met them, cold and thin. The opening, the tunnel's end, at last was before them. The outlet was blocked with some barrier, but not of stone. Across the width and height of the tunnel, a vast web was spun, orderly as the web of some huge spider, but denser woven and far greater, and each thread was as thick as rope. Frodo said, "Come, let us see what Sting can do. It is an elven blade." Then Frodo stepped up to the great gray net and hewed it with a wide, sweeping stroke, drawing the bitter edge swiftly across a ladder of close-strung cords, and at once springing away. The cleft, Cirith Ungol, was before them. A short run, and they would be through. "The pass, Sam!" he cried. "The pass! Run, run, and we'll be through!" But nothing of this evil which they had stirred up against them did poor Sam know, except that a fear was growing on him. Dread was around him, and enemies before him in the pass, and his master was in a fey mood, running heedlessly to meet them. He saw that the sword which Frodo still held, unsheathed, was glittering with blue flame. And he saw that, though the sky behind was now dark, still the window in the tower was glowing red. Sure signs that there were orcs around. Frodo was some 20 strides ahead. Soon he would be lost to sight in that gray world. A little way ahead he saw suddenly, issuing from a black hole of shadow under the cliff, the most loathsome shape that he had ever beheld. She moved with a horrible speed, making a sudden bound. She was between Sam and his master, fixing all her intent upon one prey, upon Frodo, running heedlessly up the path, unaware yet of his peril. Swiftly he ran, but Shelob was swifter. Sam gasped and gathered all his remaining breath to shout. "Look out behind!" he yelled. "Look out, master! I'm—" Suddenly his cry was stifled. "Got him," hissed Gollum in his ear. "That last, my precious. We've got him. Yes, the nasty hobbit. We takes this one. She'll get the other. Oh yes, Shelob will get him." With his master in deadly peril, Sam felt sudden violence and strength that was far beyond anything that Gollum had expected. Not Gollum himself could have twisted more quickly or more fiercely. Sam swept up his sword from the ground and raised it. Gollum squealed, and springing aside onto all fours, he jumped away in one big bound like a frog. Before Sam could reach him, he was off, running with amazing speed back toward the tunnel. So it was Sam who fought Gollum, not Frodo. And Gollum got away, not thrown over a cliff. Sword in hand, Sam went after him. For the moment he had forgotten everything else, but his fury and the desire to kill Gollum. But before he could overtake him, Gollum was gone. Then as the dark hole stood before him, and the stench came out to meet him, the thought of Frodo and the monster struck him. He spun around and rushed wildly up the path, calling and calling his master's name. He was too late. The final Two Towers chapter is largely ignored. Some has been added to the previous scene, a bit shown that was only alluded to, and a little added to a scene coming up later, but mostly just cut. And for some unknown reason, the book seems more concerned with Sam's fight with Gollum than Shelob's attack on Frodo. Frodo was already bound in cords, wound about him from ankle to shoulder, and the monster, with her great forelegs, was beginning half to lift, half to drag his body away. Near him, Sting lay on the ground, where it had fallen useless from his grasp. Sam didn't stop to think if he was brave, or loyal, or just filled with rage. He sprang forward with a yell and seized his master's sword in his left hand. Then he charged. Sam sprang in and stabbed at the clustered eyes. One great eye went dark. Her vast belly was above him, and the stench of it alone almost knocked him over. His fury held for one more blow, and before she could sink upon him, he slashed the bright elven blade across her with desperate strength. Now, we're here given a brief reference to the history of giant spiders and elvish swords, and informed that Shelob was not like a dragon and had no soft spots other than her eyes. She yielded to the stroke and then heaved up the great bag of her belly high above Sam's head. Spreading her legs, she drove her huge bulk down on him again, but too soon. For Sam still stood upon his feet, and dropping his own sword with both hands, he held the elven blade point upwards. And so Shelob, with the driving force of her own cruel will, impaled herself upon a bitter spike. Deep, deep it pushed, as Sam was crushed slowly to the ground. Slowly he raised his head and saw her, a great ooze trickling from below her wounded eye. Then she crouched, as she gathered herself for another spring. As Sam himself crouched, a thought came to him. He fumbled under his cloak and found what he sought, the vial of Galadriel. Galadriel, he said faintly. Then his voice cried in a language which he did not know. Albereth Gilthoniel! The glass blazed suddenly like a white torch in his hand. It flamed like a star that, leaping from the firmament, sears the dark air with intolerable light. In other words, he did not enter the scene brandishing the vial and cursing Shelob. Shelob fell back, beating the air with her forelegs, her sight blasted by inner lightnings, her mind in agony. Sam came on, and Shelob, cowed at last, shrunken in defeat, jerked and quivered as she tried to hasten from him. She reached the hole, and squeezing down, leaving a trail of green-yellow slime, she slipped in. Then Sam fell to the ground alone. Wearily, he crawled back to his master. "Master, dear master," he said, but Frodo did not speak. He lay now pale and heard no voice and did not move. As quickly as he could, Sam cut away the binding cords.
Don't leave me here alone. Don't go where I can't follow.
Then anger surged over him, and he ran about in a rage. Then black despair came down on him. And Sam bowed to the ground and drew his gray hood over his head, and night came into his heart. When at last the blackness passed, Sam looked, and the shadows were about him. He was still in the same place, and still his master lay beside him, dead. The mountains had not crumbled, nor the earth fallen into ruin. "What shall I do? What shall I do?" he said. Now this internal "what should I do" debate lasted for over 2 pages, largely consisting of rehashing the purpose of the fellowship and the incredible importance of it, and finally concluding, quote, "You are the last of all the company. The errand must not fail." Spoiler alert. He took the ring from Frodo. Sam started on the arduous trek to Mount Doom, continuing his inner monologue for 2 more pages. Soon Sam came to a long flight of broad, shallow steps. Now the Orc Tower was right above him, frowning black, and in it the red eye glowed. And then suddenly he heard cries and voices. He stood still as stone. Orc voices. How could he escape, or save himself, or save the ring?
Looks
The
like
ring.
old Sheelog's been having a bit of fun.
He was not aware of any thought or decision. He simply found himself drawing out the chain and taking the ring in his hand. The head of the Orc company appeared in the cleft right before him. He put it on. Now this 1-minute scene gets expanded over 9 pages or so. And here's what really took place. There were 2 groups of orcs. And as always happens when 2 groups of orcs meet, they spent the next 7 pages arguing. So, yeah, I can go along with cutting this part. Arguing about who issued what orders to who and which takes precedence, and just who or what this creature is that they've captured. They had taken Frodo's body. They were off. Sam could not catch up with them. Still, he labored on. They were still running along deeper and deeper into the mountain, back towards the tower. The orcs continued their grumbling until one makes some comment about Frodo being carrion. Shagrat, the more or less leader of the orcs, responds, "Carrion? Is that all you know of her ladyship? When she binds with cords, she's after meat. She doesn't eat dead meat, nor suck cold blood. This fellow ain't dead." Sam was so shocked that he almost swooned. But even as he fought to keep hold of his senses, deep inside he heard a voice. "You fool! He isn't dead, and your heart knew it. Don't trust your head, Samwise. It's not the best part of you. Now, what is to be done?" Shagrat continued, she's got more than one poison. When she's hunting, she just gives a dab in the neck and they go as limp as boned fish. And then she has her way with them. This little filth will wake up in a few hours, and beyond feeling a bit sick for a bit, he'll be all right. The great doors slammed to. Boom! The gate was shut. Sam hurled himself against the bolted brazen plates and fell senseless to the ground. Frodo was alive, but taken by the enemy. And against all expectations, we finally come to the end of the Two Towers. Again, following Tolkien's timeline in the appendix, we will next return to the Siege of Gondor, as everything really starts to heat up. Thanks for watching, and remember the whole like and subscribe litany.